Obviously, this is a huge scandal that has rocked not only the royal family, but also Westminster. Can you just tell us what's the mood over there at the moment?
Well, it's also against a backdrop of international political affairs trespassing upon our domestic ones. I deliberately use the word political because the thread going through politics and public affairs at the moment in London is Donald Trump. We know of Epstein through Donald Trump. Clearly, there is some linkage with Prince, we'll call him Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. There's bewilderment. People are not demanding an alteration in the line of succession, which is being canvassed in the press today. There's no great demand, but people assume there's a degree of logic, having uh, taken all the titles away from Prince Andrew. There I go again. Um,
So, does that mean, if I can just interrupt you there, does that mean that it's not likely to happen? I mean, because obviously it would require an act of parliament. So, um, what
well,
what would compel MPs to take that step?
Well, I think the government must be talking every day and probably a number of times a day with 14 other independent countries, large ones like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and even tiny Tuvalu with a population of 11,000. It's an independent state where the king is the head of state along with the United Kingdom, and all of them have to be consulted, and all of them would be required to pass simultaneous legislation if there was to be any alteration in the succession. So it's not straightforward.
What about
Um,
Gibraltar?
Sadly, Gibraltar's legislature, their parliament, won't have the right to vote on this matter or express a view. I mean, they express a view, but it won't be a statutory view um, simply because overseas territories do not have the status of an independent state, such as, say, Australia, New Zealand, or Tuvalu. It's I've always been an advocate of Gibraltar having what used to be called Dominion status. In other words, they would have parity with countries such as Australia, New Zealand, and Tuvalu. Um, but they don't, and so the crown dependencies and the overseas territories will be legislated for by the Westminster Parliament.
Okay, now what about Peter Mandelson? Because obviously he's resigned from the House of Lords, but he retains his life peerage. Will steps be taken in Westminster to have that removed
I
at
think
all?
almost certainly, and I don't think actually we've been being told the whole truth by number 10 and for that matter Buckingham Palace. The Duke of York has lost his title. The Duke of York was a peerage. He's been his seizing of these titles and throwing them away has been done by a posh thing called letters patent. If they can do it for the Duke of York, so he is no longer holding that peerage, I can't see why they can't do it by letters patent with Peter Mandelson. By letters patent, it means basically a signature of the monarch.
Andrew, if I can say to you that it's impossible to imagine that much of these behaviors, particularly surrounding Andrew, were not known, whether, by the royal family, the secret services, Westminster. And yet he was appointed as, the UK trade envoy. Are questions being asked now about why this has been allowed to, progress so far?
Yes, they are now asking those questions, but Parliament has been ducking its duty, in my view, to examine this whole issue of trade envoys, which seems to be have been abused, not just by Andrew, but by uh, others who've subsequently been appointed to similar posts or titles of office, which do not, so far as I'm aware, have a proper job description. I mean, I'd like to know precisely what the circumstances were, whether or not it was Her Majesty, the late Queen, asked the Prime Minister to find something for her second son to do, or if it was on the initiative of Peter Mandelson or some other minister. I think it would have been under the Blair regime, saying, "Oh, look here, there's no paying it, but just put in the invoices for the expenses, and be left like that. And your job is what you make of it. You decide how you project and convey the promotion of British trade in various countries. It was all left up in the air, and it should have been probed by the House of Commons appropriate select committee, but they've abdicated, no pun intended, on doing their duty. So it's now beginning to be looked at, both in respect of Prince Andrew, which ministry, Labour Conservative, which minister, Mandelson, Blair, and whose initiative it was that Andrew should have this blank cheque to roam the world. Also, when you met, when we met ambassadors and high commissioners, invariably they would trespass upon recent visits by various VIPs, and then the name Prince Andrew would come up, and everyone would of our hosts would snigger, and you would ask them to elaborate, but they would just smile at you and wink.
Is change afoot? That's what the
Oh,
public wants to
I
know.
think so. And there has to be. Indeed, if people want to save the monarchy as providing their head of state, they're going to have to think and address this issue with some expedition, except for the fact you have to bear in mind that these 14 other countries who also have a right to have a say in it.
Well, you touched on something that I wanted to ask you, Andrew. Sorry if I can interrupt you. Can
Yeah,
the monarchy really survive this? I mean, this does seem to be the biggest scandal that has rocked the monarchy in recent times.
I suspect it will, but it will never be bright mornings again. They're battered and bruised, and they themselves ought to take some initiative of limiting what constitutes the royal family. That should be much more narrow, and things such as the succession and removing titles from people, that needs to be resolved by statute from a point of view of being tidy. I remember I was in the House of Commons when Prime Minister John Major announced the divorce or the splitting of Diana and Prince Charles, and he said words to the effect, "And there is no reason why, in time, Diana should not become Queen of the United Kingdom." There was a gasp because there was it's illogical. A happy royal family, at least externally and publicly, needs to be united. It would have been absurd if their separation had carried on and Diana survived, that she would be Queen of England now, but not living or being divorced from
Mm.
Charles. The whole thing needs to be reviewed. I mean, I'm not a monarchist. I think it is absurd how we choose our head of state, or we don't choose it, it's delivered. But nevertheless, I have respect for obviously Her late Majesty, who was a distinguished, outstanding public servant, of whom we're all proud. But that's a personal view of her. The others are mortals like the rest of us. And I think it is not realistic in the this century to be having a head of state handed down to us by accident of birth. It's
Well, I have
ridiculous.
well, I have to say, people don't really have too much faith in politicians either. I mean, look at the Labour Party at the moment, like the Conservative Party, lurching from one disaster and one scandal to another. What are your thoughts about the Labour Party? They waited so long to get in, and it just does not seem to be going well at all.
Well, as you know, I left the Labour Party after 52 years of continuous membership, and it was largely over Brexit. I partly blame Jeremy Corbyn and Labour leadership in those days for having us being out of Europe. For me, Europe was a passionate, and is a passionate cause, and so proud of Gibraltar for their unequivocal stand demonstrating their pro-European credentials. Anyway, I left, but obviously I still wish the Labour Party well. But they keep they're void of any theme or leadership now. The repeated U-turns is it just has all the hallmarks of chaos. So I just hope and think that we can uh, pull things together for the next 2 or 3 years. And the next general election, there is a hung parliament and there's a sufficient scope for the Liberals to be a supporting party, Ed Davey being a deputy prime minister, because coalitions, in my view, actually are quite favourable. I'm not a person who thinks, oh, damn, we've got to have a coalition. I think it makes for better decision making. You still can have errors and stupid decisions, for instance, relating to the university charges for students. Big mistake of the last coalition of which the Liberals supported, but better decision making is made, as indeed the coalition which has operated in Gibraltar for a decade plus. It works, and the sharing of decision making of Fabian Picardo with Joseph Garcia and their colleagues seems to me to be providing good governance. I don't trespass upon the domestic views of what's happening in Gibraltar, but purely in terms of administering government.
In terms of Gibraltar, we have a treaty that is very soon to be published. How well do you think that will be received in Parliament over there?
I think it be received with great deal of satisfaction by the majority of members of Parliament who are sensible. And I have in my mind's eye people who are conservatives, Liberal Democrats, nationalists, and Labour Party people. It'll be a welcome thing, not just for Gibraltar, who should take a lot of credit for delivering this treaty, but the treaty has impact both upon what the Labour government can do in respect of its relationship with Europe. It will be a green light for them to get re-engaged, I think, and also I think it's interesting. It's for the first time in hundreds of years, Gibraltar has